Sexy, titillating, provocative, and at times subversive. Porn provides a well-needed service for men and women all over the world. With feminists attacking the porn industry, is it any wonder that men's rights advocates and porn stars have become such enthusiastic bedfellows? Welcome to the show tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight's topic is why porn is better
than social justice.
Yes, that's what I was...
Yeah. And we are joined with by Mercedes Carrera. And I'm so glad that I got that right.
The lovely Mercedes Carrera.
The lovely Mercedes Carrera. And with us also is Karen Strawn, Hannah Wallen, of course my co-host Rachel Edwards, and Anna Cherry. So, why don't we get this started by doing a roundtable? Let's start with you, Rachel. Or no, actually guess first. Mercedes, why do you think porn is better than social justice?
Gosh, what about porn isn't better than social justice? It's actually really interesting to me that social justice has become such a dirty word. It's actually dirtier than porn. And I'm sure you all remember not too long ago when we did our charity event, and a certain gaming nonprofit wouldn't work with me, not because of porn, but because of my association with Gamergate. So the social justice issue was a bigger issue for them, that I was calling out hypocrisy and standing on the side of Gamergate and free speech. And I think that what you're seeing these days is that horseshoe effect. We're really seeing what used to be in the porn industry, it was always the right is bad, Republicans are bad, they're the ones who are limiting our free speech, and et cetera, et cetera. And now we're actually seeing that it's these leftist, quote-unquote, self-described progressive social justice types that are doing so. And so, porn has always been a normal human outlet. From the beginning of time, humans were creating models of genitals and drawing pictures of copulation. I mean, it's the genitive principle. It's from which we all come. So I think it's kind of ridiculous to continue to have this moral panic conversations about pornography.
Well, just to pull out one thing that you said, you're sort of comparing pornography to the kind of stuff we're doing in Gamergate and opposing ethics in journalism. Is there a reason why you did that instead of comparing it necessarily to the traditional concept of social justice, which is more of the leftist, or quote-unquote leftist? Just could you explain why you did that, or do you mind if I?
Sure. Well, I think what you're asking is why I draw the parallel with that and not just general social justice. And anyone who's followed Gamergate saw quickly that it was the kind of quote-unquote social justice warrior internet Tumblrina types who were opposing Gamergate. And I think the reason that so many porn actresses like Anna and myself really started speaking out on this is, it's that it's all about free speech. I mean, pornography is free speech. And I had this conversation with somebody who was trying to make pornography about human trafficking or prostitution, et cetera, and it's not. It's an issue of free speech, both legally as well as morally. So those are two different issues that the moral panic has tried to conflate. And so Gamergate was a good example of a recent fight on the internet, if you will, regarding these issues. I think that the idea of social justice in it of itself is a good one. I think that it's important to have justice. Justice is a good thing. It's just that terminology, that phrase has become conflated with really people who value emotionality over logic and freedom.
And I would agree with that. I'm just initially it seemed like you were comparing pornography to the kind of stuff we're doing with Gamergate, and like you were saying, I think Gamergate is about freedom of expression, and pornography is definitely an expression, so it should be free. But in terms of this show, we were sort of going to focus more on the much more authoritarian aspects of social justice and see how they compare in a sort of a tongue-in-cheek way with pornography. And one way that I would suggest that pornography is better than social justice is that, at least in terms of the social justice that it's applying to women, they're still using women's sexuality, except they're using it to enforce an authoritarian sort of attitude towards how people behave towards each other, what they're allowed to consume in terms of their media. And I find it so funny because they turn around and say porn exploits women. Well, you're using women and women's sexuality to give the moral impetus to your authoritarian. You're doing the same thing. You're exploiting women just as much. And to use an example, there was I guess a feminist parent who brought her daughter to Slutwalk, and she was wearing very slutty clothing in order to sell the message of this sort of feminist anti-sex prudery. And it's like, yeah, well, that's using her sexuality. It's exactly what you say pornography does, except when you do it, you're actually restricting people instead of having an expression of something that's, like you were saying, Mercedes, it's something so basic to being human. I know that wasn't really a question, but did you want to say anything to that?
Well, I think this is why some of us have spoken out against the social justice cabal, which is that they are hypocrisy defined. I mean, the slut walks are a perfect example of free the nipples, let's walk around topless. It's totally fine when I do it, but when a woman that I find to be sexually threatening does it, now it's exploitive, now it's anti-feminist, now it's pandering to men. And I think that this is why a lot of porn actresses are starting to really speak out on this, because what happens is we are the marginalized women of feminism. They don't like us existing because we are sexually threatening. And if you really look at what feminism has become, it's nothing more than women who feel threatened in society, who are largely privileged, and they especially feel threatened by who they consider to be marginalized women, who gather more attention and therefore resources from men. And that's why you see mostly straight women fighting this.
I would have to agree, and I think that one of the most interesting things, like, because it just came down the pike this last week, was Amnesty International voted to advocate for the decriminalization of sex work, and one of the main reasons that they did this was because sex work being criminalized really it increases the exploitation of women. It increases their vulnerability to trafficking. It increases, like there's such a thing as work and slavery, and there's such a thing as sex work and sex slavery. And what they want to do is they want to separate the two so that women who are engaged in sex work, who are victimized by their johns, by their clients, by their pimps, whatever, that they have an outlet to be able to go and deal with that victimization without being afraid of being arrested themselves. And I think this is absolutely wonderful. I think that this is a great idea. And none of it justifies or in any way apologizes for or excuses or allows for sex slavery to continue. And when you look at the arguments against it, the arguments are all about sex trafficking and sex slavery. Nothing about sex work. And it's the same thing with, it really is. It's not just a question of freedom of expression. It's a question of the freedom to do what you choose to do. If you choose to be in porn, if you choose to be a sex worker, if you think that that's your best option, the option that you want to go with, rather than working in a factory picking apart plastic forks from a mold and packing them in boxes for minimum wage, right? If this is what you would rather do for less time for more money, right, then you should have the right to do that if it's what you want to do, if you're not being exploited. And so essentially, it really just comes down to a question of giving people the freedom to do what they want to do, to say what they want to say, and to consume what the material, the media that they want to consume. So it's just absolutely, like, the whole thing with the tired social justice. You have all these celebrities coming out against Amnesty International's proposal and eventual decision, right? Saying that this is going to perpetuate the exploitation of women, the trafficking of women, the sex slavery of women. No, it won't. right? It will just make women who choose to be in that business, in that profession, have legal recourse when they're victimized.
Mercedes, again, I know it's not a question, but did you want to add anything to that?
Well, I think Karen's absolutely right, and I think again, this is the problem with people conflating pornography with prostitution, with sex work. Now, that's not to say that I have no problem calling myself a sex worker. I don't make a huge delineation there. I think, and I stand with sex workers, and I think that it should be decriminalized. But this is the constant moral panic argument against pornography is this trafficked women and enslaved women. And I'm going to tell you, the porn industry is very, very competitive. This is what I always say. And there are no trafficked women in pornography. It doesn't work that way. And even, when you go into Eastern Europe, you see these women are working and they're making the kind of wages that nobody in the United States would be willing to be paid for these types of scenes. They're still exerting a better option. I mean, if you look at sex work as a whole, it's the world's oldest profession. When they actually gave, I think it was, I can't remember if it was chimpanzees or bonobos, it was some type of primate currency. The scientists created currency.
Capuchin monkeys.
There you go. See, Karen, of course, knows it. If you guys look it up, I mean, they gave them a currency system. You know what the first thing they did was created a prostitution market. And it's in our nature. It's in our nature. Sexuality, women, the females hold this. And by the way, the other issue I have with this, when we talk about pornography and we talk about sex slavery and all of that, they act like women are the ones who are most exploited. You know who's most exploited by sex slavery is children. Not women, children. And you don't see them talking about that. When are the feminists talking about that? No, it's all about women because, again, it goes back to them being sexually threatened. They don't like prostitutes because instead of creating emotional loading around sexuality, they make it available for a fee, and they take all the bullshit off of it. And so if prostitution is available on every street corner, then you don't get little Miss Biddy who wants to wait 16 days to make a guy get down on bended knee with a gold ring to propose, to get a blowjob. Like, it takes the power out of that. And I think that's a good thing for male and female relations. And by the way, there are still just as many male prostitutes. Talking about pornography, gay porn, transsexual porn are some of the biggest sellers, and that's again something that the feminist types don't like to address.
Well, another thing they don't like to address is the fact that in the most highly patriarchal societies, the people who are trafficked the most for sex are young teenage and preteen boys, because the women are protected from that.
Yep, exactly.
Well, ultimately, in my view, it all goes back to what Mercedes touched upon and what I like to call the pussy economy. It is a way for women who are more prudish and who withhold sex as a way to get more value out of that commodity, which is sex. As we saw with monkeys and with humans, it is something valuable. So a good way to make sure you get the most money, gold, like diamond engagement rings, weddings, just attention and resources of a man is by limiting free pussy that is out there, such as porn, such as prostitution, some other way for a man to get that commodity without having to pay every last little bit of soul he has to this woman that's demanding it. And I think, going back to the social justice and porn aspect, that porn was the original social justice. Like, I agree with Mercedes, social justice is a beautiful concept, and it's a shame that it was so stolen and corrupted for people's personal authoritarian gains, because like we said, porn is the oldest profession, and it usually included marginalized people that had no other option necessarily, or it was a better option than what they had. And it was sometimes women who are not educated, that's the only commodity they feel like they have, and there's nothing wrong with exchanging something that you have for something that you want. So we also see representation of trans and queer and gay and every type of spectrum of human that there is in porn. It is basically a place where you can come and feel okay about who you are as a human, the way you were made by whatever. And porn celebrates all aspects of life and sexuality, and it's a very inclusive space. And so to see feminism, and especially third wave radfems and Dworkin ideas about the mere act of sex with a man is somehow being exploited by that man. All of those go down to these women's personal issues with liberation and with their own sexuality and with the desire to control. So it is quite very much hypocrisy embodified.
I would have to agree.
You know, there goes my mute key.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry about that. Like right in the middle of trying to talk.
No, Karen, I think you have horror vaculi just like me. You got to get into the space.
No, I was just trying to fill the empty air.
No, I know.
Okay, you guys just both said the same thing. I'm kind of going to bounce off of what Anna said, because she said the beginning of what I was going to say anyway. And it really goes back to women owning and controlling and basically access to sexual gratification, access to sexual intimacy, and being in control of how relationships form and what they mean in society. And you look at social justice. Social justice warriors, particularly feminists, kind of claim to want to break that down, and they claim to want to end the roles that are related to that, the gender roles that are related to that. They claim to want to change the way it's done and everything, but every single stinking thing they have come up with in the last couple of centuries has been about exploiting that system. They rely on continuing to treat women as gatekeepers. They rely on continuing to treat sex and sexuality, female sexuality, as a commodity rather than a means of relating back and forth between women and men. They rely on that. All of their ideology related to sexual violence, all of their ideology related to considering women to be oppressed by things like being looked at, that's all related to, goes back to treating women as gatekeepers of sex, but not individually. And that's where the big problem that they have with porn comes in. It's not women who are individual gatekeepers. It's women as a society.
As a cartel.
As a cartel, or if you want to look at it that way, as a union. And then with the union being gatekeepers of who is approved to have relationships and who is approved to have gratification and so on.
And what price you're allowed to sell. It's price fixing.
What you have to do to obtain a relationship, to become part of a relationship. And basically, you know, how you earn your place. Being those gatekeepers and being those controllers, they see anybody in the sex industry, in any aspect of the sex industry that is there willingly, as a scab. You're breaking the strike. You're breaking the gatekeeping standard. And according to the way unions work, that hurts everybody else in the union, based, you know, by their theory, because you can't hold lack of access. You can't hold it hostage, you know, by lack of access for a better deal if someone else doesn't do that. And so that's where slut shaming comes from. That's where you know, the hatred of pornography comes from. It's where in our pop culture, songs like "You Better Shop Around" come from. It's where our clothing styles come from, where clothing is designed to tease the eye, and clothing that, instead of teasing, just lets it all hang out, is considered slutty, whereas clothing that draws attention to a woman's sexual appearance, but doesn't you know, doesn't let it all hang out, that's approved. And it
doesn't give it away.
Yeah, it's all about treating women as gatekeepers, and in order to maintain that gatekeeper status,
did you just
I just had a statement go up through the chat. Industry has 3 syllables. Why is it surprising to hear me pronounce industry as having 3 syllables?
Okay,
Um,
that's a bit of
but
a non sequitur.
I shouldn't have that window open while I'm talking. It
No,
totally
no. If it's going to distract you, if it's going to
fuck.
trigger your attention deficit disorder, don't pay
Okay.
attention. Don't
Yeah,
pay attention to the
but going
tutorial.
on. Okay, so shit. What was the last thing I said?
essentially, slut shaming, price fixing, the
Okay, yeah,
sexual.
the whole thing about the pop culture and all that. Yeah, that just completely blew my mind. What's wrong with industry having three
She's
syllables?
having a brain fart. She's having a brain
Okay,
fart. It's
all right.
not the 3 syllables. It's where you place the accent on the syllable.
Okay, guys.
All right. Well, in any case, it's the objection that social justice warriors have isn't that women are being exploited. It is that women who make their own individual decisions about sex and who basically buck the union. Women who do not bow to the sexual authority of the top echelons of female society. They keep women who want to exploit sex itself from doing so as effectively as they can. And shit, there was something else I really wanted to say about this, and I can't for the life of me remember.
You know what, Hannah? Put it on the back burner. It'll probably come to you at the least inopportune moment. And I just wanted to, before we go to Rachel, just wanted to see if Mercedes had anything she wanted to say in response to what either Hannah or Karen or Anna. I know it was quite a few names there.
Well, I think the other part of this, and this is where, I mean, I hate to say, but we're talking about social justice, but social justice is largely led by a bunch of women who consider themselves to be feminists, and I think we kind of come back to that, which is that part of the reason that pornography and sex work and all of these things, and I've been watching the chat, and a lot of the men make the claim, well, men are exploited by sex workers. And here's the reality of it. And as a woman who was a sex worker, this is, the bottom line truth is the feminists don't like porn because it makes sex available and free on the internet. Like, everyone says I'm making money off of it. Well, not really. I mean, not nearly as much as a Hollywood feminist is. So no, that's not how that works, number one. Number two, men who are paying for sex are paying for either not having to deal with the relationship in order to get the sex, or they're men who are unable to pull sex for free at a bar, and so they're choosing to pay for sex. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but that's the reality of it. Things have a price. If I want to go out and buy a sofa for my house, it's going to cost me something. It's a commodity. It's something that I want. And I think that this is, I hear this a lot from the MRAs and the MGTOWs who have often made this argument that I'm exploiting men. Well, sex is sex. And by the way, again, the highest grossing porn market is actually the gay market. So what of that? Again, this is just about sexuality is a part of human life. And by the way, people like me normalize it and actually make it cheaper for everyone else to maintain and to obtain. So I think that's another piece of this puzzle.
Well, I think just to speak directly to this, and yes, I know Rachel's in the wings waiting. First of all, statistically, if you look at the studies that have looked into this, porn usage by men does reduce or actually increase their selectiveness when choosing a mate, a partner, a female partner. And in this day and age, a porn collection isn't going to run off with half of your stuff and your kids. It's just not. It's just going to sit. It's not going to do that. It might cost money, but it's not going to end up doing that to you. So being more selective about your female partners is overall a better thing. Now, having said that, if it was possible for men and women to have more equal sexual value in the marketplace, that would be something I would think that would be good to strive for if it's possible. But if it isn't possible, then a palliative factor allowing men to be more choosy about selecting a woman with that much control over their lives is intelligent as far as I'm concerned. I'm not sure how we would go about equalizing the sexual market value. I suppose, if you go back in history and you look at cultures like ancient Greece or Rome, the idea was that sexual desire went from the female to the male, although I'm sure there are other aspects of those societies which we wouldn't want to really replicate at all, but I don't know. I'll throw that out too. I know that Mercedes and Karen are probably itching to counter what I'm saying right there, that there might be a possibility to equalize it. I don't think that marginalizing porn stars or sex workers at this point in time will do anything to create that, to move towards that. It's just
Yes.
do you want to go with Rachel, or?
Yes, I do. Well, the reason I was going to give my reason. It took me a moment for me to come with one particular reason why I believe that porn is better than social justice, and I think my top reason is that it's a lot more honest than social justice, because if you look at what's taking place and you see the way that they're dealing with the topic of sex, what they have done is they have taken multiple viewpoints so that they've kind of covered all of the bases. So you've got people who are like just really puritanical about it on the extreme end of radical feminism, and you also have these other women who are claiming to be sex positive, and just every end of the spectrum. They're pretty much covering every end of the spectrum, but often being incredibly hypocritical about it. So they're holding contradictory views to one another when it suits them, whereas porn is pretty upfront about what it's doing. It's like you're going to be watching some people having sex. You're going to maybe read some things about people having sex. And to me, that's a lot more honest. You're at least saying what your position is on sex and how you feel about it. And it's right there for everyone to see. There's no beating around the bushes and saying, oh, well, I kind of feel this way, and just kind of taking a bit of column A and a bit of column B whenever it suits you. It's just right there. And I think I appreciate that a great deal.
Okay, I did recall the other things that I was going to want to say. The first one, I actually am going to put on the back burner and talk about the second one a little bit, because it's kind of it kind of goes with what Rachel was saying, with what's been talked about recently, and both of you are mentioning, the honesty, and Mercedes mentioned, that it's a commodity like any other commodity. When I was thinking about it, porn is really a portrayal of a life aspect, just like any other. Like, you go to a movie and you see movies about not necessarily sci-fi and stuff like that, but even in those movies, characters have to be believable. There has to be some aspect of real life to that movie, and we watch all that stuff for entertainment. And this is just another area of watching an aspect of real life portrayed on a screen in a fictional way, and sometimes in ways that the manner it's portrayed in is very fictional. But we're just fictionalizing things in real life for entertainment, and the only possible reason for it to be demonized the way that it is it's the same thing as how we demonize violence in media. We see people demonizing violence in media. People are using it as a scapegoat, for their own personal frustrations, or their own inability to accept human characteristics. The fact that there are people who are naturally violent, or there are people who are naturally assholes, or there are people who are naturally, like, even if we don't like the word slutty, there are people who are naturally have a tendency to not be faithful to their partners, and not be honest about being unfaithful to their partners. And all of these things are the objections are not necessarily due to any real problem within the portrayal. Like, yeah, I got people in the chat joking about things in porn that are not out of real life, like the pizza guy. Well, we don't fly around in spaceships either, but a large portion of the reason that sci-fi shows like Firefly are so beloved is because the human aspect of those shows is something that we can identify with. And nearly everybody can identify with wanting sexual intimacy with somebody else. Nearly everybody can identify with wanting to feel good. And nearly everybody can identify with wanting to feel wanted. And these are all things that you see in porn, that you see people being wanted, you see people feeling good, you see sexual intimacy. And even though it, like I said, it's a fictional portrayal, it's not the way sex happens at home. It is still, it's entertaining because it brings those things to mind, and puts those things in the forefront of your mind, and so it feels good to watch it, just the same way as it feels good to watch sci-fi that shows people having human experiences in the context of an interesting story. But the other thing that I wanted to talk about was how class kind of comes into this. When we treat women as a society, we treat women as an upper class to men as a lower class. And it's like all of the world is divided by gender, with women being the upper class, the privileged class, the class that doesn't necessarily have to face as many of life's hardships, doesn't have to solve as many of life's problems, and isn't considered as responsible for things that go wrong, or for even for their own behavior. Whereas, men as the lower class are the ones that are treated as having to do the work. They're ones that are treated as having to earn the company of women, and they're the ones that are not exempt from facing a lot of life's rougher side. And it's that as gatekeepers of sexual intimacy and of relationships and so on, that's part of the reason why women were able to get themselves set up that way, get themselves treated as men, or by men as an upper class, because they had a commodity that they could trade for it. And so, you, instead of trading work to get what you want, you're trading access to yourself. You're trading deigning to have a relationship with someone, to be close to someone and accept that person into your life. Like, you have to portray yourself as something special and something extra valuable in order to do that. And where the whole slut shaming thing comes in, and the whole all the clothing stuff I was talking about before, that stuff occurred because it's necessary for women to strive to keep that upper class status if they want to be able to trade access to relationships and consider themselves a commodity in order to have resources given to them by men without them having to be the worker, the earner, the person who faces life's rougher side. And that's why we developed as a gender these standards, like the standards for being a lady, the behaviors you used to have to exhibit to be considered a lady. And all feminism has done is try to demand that women receive the benefits of that arrangement without having to hold up their end of the deal. And that's, like Rachel was saying, porn is more honest than social justice. That is probably the biggest example right there. Porn being more honest than social justice.
Okay, Mercedes, you go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think that that's an excellent point, Hannah, which is that, it's really, it's entertainment. So pornography is entertainment. That's it. That's all it is. It's literally a variety of different scenarios of people having sex in varieties of ways that your average viewer probably would like to have sex in, that maybe it's not available to them. I mean, it's fantasy, and I think, pointing out like sci-fi is fantasy, and all of these TV shows, I mean, these are fantasy. This is just entertainment. And I think part of the problem is that people are so not open sexually that everybody thinks that relationships are all about sex, which they aren't. Relationships are not all about sex. Sex is just a part of a relationship or relationships, and that's all it is. And so what I've noticed, and most of the people I know at this point are in the porn industry, and guess what? We all deal with sex all the time, so it's not nearly as important. There's no stigma to it anymore because we're so exposed to it. And the irony is that as a result, a lot of the porn actors and performers that I know have really healthy relationships full of transparency and honesty and trust and radical authenticity. And that's what relationships should be about. And yet social justice especially likes to load it around sexuality. A lot of the feminists do, and some of the extreme men's groups do. They make it all about sex, and it shouldn't be. I mean, relationships are something totally different. It should be a part of it, just like hanging out watching a movie. How well do we get along intellectually, and spiritually and emotionally, and all this this thing. And so I think what I find curious, standing from the outside, is once you come to terms with yourself, your inner shadow, Jung would say you do your shadow work, and you align yourself, and you embrace the darkest parts of yourself, which is what pornography gives you an outlet for. Especially the feminists like to rail against a lot of violent porn. Well, guess what? People who have violent urges, when they watch the violent porn and they jerk off to it and they come, don't feel the urge to go out and do the violent thing. And so that's been proven, and yet there's still a false narrative that this type of pornography stimulates people to act in less than desirable ways, and it's simply not true. It's actually an opportunity for people to kind of remedy that within themselves. And so that's, when you're talking about fantasy, that's kind of what it brought to mind for me.
I would have to agree that porn, because Catherine McKinnon and Andrea Dworkin both testified in front of a Senate committee on pornography way, way back when, decades ago. They were praised for their testimony, and their testimony was essentially that porn trains men to rape. And all of their testimony has been completely contradicted by the fact that when porn moved from XXX theaters into people's homes through VCRs and then the internet, rape has steadily decreased. So the more access to porn there is, the less rape there is, right? This is clearly not teaching men to rape. It's not training men to go out and victimize women. But one of the really interesting things is, like, when we talk about sort of the sexual cartel and stuff like that, I don't know if everybody's really aware of it. But the people who were most instrumental in establishing and then raising age of consent laws were first wave feminists. They were heavily involved in the temperance movement, the abolitionist movement, and the suffrage movement. And they essentially wanted men to have fewer options to get sex from attractive women. And you even look at the signs that those women were holding in that temperance poster, "Lips that touch liquor will never touch ours." None of those women were really on any level capable of making that into a threat that any man would take seriously. So you had this, even these really unattractive women like Carrie Nation holding female sexuality hostage, essentially saying, if you don't make this constitutional amendment that bans alcohol, you're not going to get laid. I'm like, seriously, this was a tool of political change in early feminist hands. And you look now, and yes, there's still the female sexual cartel. Yes, there's still the female sexual trade union. They're not so much interested in necessarily what price they can extract from men that benefits women, right? So they're not necessarily interested in a price that they can extract in terms of enforced commitment, monogamy, providing protection, all of those things from the men involved. But they're still interested in extracting a price, which is, I think, why there's this huge push over the last 10 to 20 years to expand the definition of rape. If men are going to get sex for free, they're going to pay one way or the other. And essentially, the price he pays is either going to be in terms of a commitment to the woman who wants a commitment, or 5 years in prison if she didn't want a commitment or he wasn't willing to give it to her, right? So it's absolutely just bizarre to me that nobody is able to see this. And when you look again at why porn is better than social justice, honestly, if porn allows a certain number of men, if it takes the edge off, if it's, not the best, if it's not the best thing in the world, but when you do the cost benefit analysis, it's not that bad, right? And keeps them clear of those kinds of pitfalls, I think that it's absolutely better than social justice. I think that men, particularly for men, it gives them an option that it might not be great, but it's better than nothing, and it's also better than a lot of the alternatives.
Yeah, I wanted to break in real quick with one point. As Mercedes brought up the social justice tendency to make claims about violent forms of porn and everything, and I just wanted to say, like, ever since watching the paranormal activity movies, I have desperately wanted an attic to trap a demon in, so that I could just keep a demon as a pet in my house. It's totally the gateway to wanting things that you never would have wanted in the first place. I just got to have that demon in my attic.
Well, and I can see in the chat that they're going to the don't teach men not to rape, give them a porno. I don't think it's really that. I wonder if it really is that one-to-one a relationship. But it's. Sorry, go ahead.
The big problem with that comes from the idea that somehow being direct about sexual communication is reality, and it absolutely is not. If women did not send mixed signals and then proceeded with sex anyway, then men wouldn't have to wonder if no actually means no. So I feel like they're conflating teach men not to rape is something of its own world, and it's something that needs to be discussed separately, because it's not that one-to-one at all. And ultimately, it has to do with the way humans communicate. And a lot of times, nothing kills a libido quicker than saying, "Can I kiss you now?" And I know feminists and quote-unquote progressives will rebel against that, but that is just ignoring reality and ignoring human sexual interactions, which a lot of times go on body language and on nuance. And a lot of times, the mystery is what is so appealing. So part of it, when you're talking about actual rapists, people who actually have a problem, porn might be a stopgap, but ultimately they need psychiatric help. While we have people who are falsely accused of rape because they're not reading signals correctly, or a woman decides to change her mind in the middle of it and doesn't communicate that directly, and he's supposed to read her mind, all of those things that are part of normal human interactions of bumping into each other and maybe kind of causing harm to each other, but not really all that bad, because that's part of human interaction. When you interact, there's a risk of harm. Those two are very separate. Actual rape versus teach men not to rape. You cannot teach a sick person not to be sick. So those two are so different that I think we should have a whole talk show on that.
Yeah, well, there's always the spin-off topics that should be their own show. What I wanted to actually get into was this idea of, I think one way that porn is better than social justice is that I think it's a more honest conversation about human sexuality. I think that social justice wants to, and I'll use the term objectify, it wants to objectify women down to victims of men's sexuality, and wants to objectify men into essentially just either via their natural instincts to rape or pillage, or just because that somehow men teach each other to rape women, but that's not innate to manhood. It's because of toxic masculinity. I don't understand the logic, but regardless, they want to reduce men down to being sexual aggressors and women down to being sexual victims, and it's such a painfully fundamentalist approach to gender. And it's not just social justice warriors, you also see this in more fundamentalist religious communities, but it's such a painfully reductionist look at gender. And I wanted to actually ask, I was listening to you, Mercedes, talking about why men use sex workers, and when I was researching a lot of what sex workers say about why their clients seek them out, there was actually a talk about feeling like the men wanting to feel desired and also listened to. So the component of the sexuality was there, but also this component of feeling like a whole human being that they couldn't get outside of paying for it, which is sort of a sad statement on our society. but that the men sought out sex workers or even went to strip clubs to feel like they were desirable human beings, and also to have a woman actually, they called it the girlfriend experience, actually listen to them without judging them for their feelings and their opinions and their desires and even their vulnerabilities. And I wanted to see what your opinion was on that as a component of men seeking out sex work.
Yeah, well, I think that generally, when we're talking heterosexual relationships, and I'm talking in generalities, but women tend to be very, very judgmental of men's sexuality because women have been not only trained, but there's a biological component of believing that their sexual capacity is a commodity in total, and also really just this kind of control. I mean, there's a reason that the feminists all went batshit when they got called bossy. And it's because a lot of women are really bossy. So, men will bring to the table some sexual interest or some desire they have or something they want to try, whether it's, ass play, and they don't want to be judged for it, right? Like, let's say you have a man who wants to do some butt stuff, and he's afraid of being judged. He's afraid of bringing that to his girlfriend or to a woman he's dating because he's afraid of what she might think of him. And so sex workers become an outlet, and because there's an exchange of money, now it's basically like going to see a therapist. And also, I think people negate there's a potential for sexuality as a gateway to intimacy in a real way, because when you're sexual, you're open and you're revealed. I mean, it's not a surprise that a lot of porn performers we become good friends with each other. Doesn't mean we're in love with each other, but we're all friends, or we're friendly. We try to be, because you're in a revealed situation with each other. And a lot of men, somebody just conflated what I said and said that I said men should pay for sex. It's not what I said. I said that paying for sex can be a pragmatic option for a lot of men. Maybe they don't have time for a relationship. Maybe they want to have sexual experiences outside of the bounds of their relationship, but they value their relationship. And I think that that's probably one of the bigger demographics of men who go to sex workers are men who are married or are in stable relationships but want to have certain experiences that their primary relationship will not allow them to. And the financial outlay of going to see a sex worker who's trained in that field, or at least very experienced in it, is less detrimental than the risk of trying to carry on a relationship outside of a marriage and running the risk of having that destroy that primary relationship. So for a lot of men, they're very judged. They're judged by the world. There's a lot of pressure. There's a pressure from their primary relationships and their children and their bosses. And so it's very, very rare for men to have a place to really kind of go and be supported. And I think that a lot of the MRA and the MGTOW movements, what they're kind of getting at is men used to have fraternal organizations where they would meet, and they, whether it was the Masons or the Elks Lodge or what have you, and be supported and have a place to talk. That doesn't exist anymore. And on top of it, men want to be desired because everybody wants to be desired. The problem is that the pendulum has swung so far in the way of, I hear this all the time, make the woman feel desired, make her feel special, make her love you, a diamond is forever, all this shit. And there's not really a lobby geared toward women to say, hey, make the man in your life feel appreciated, make him feel loved, make him feel desired. And I think that that's one of the biggest problems that we have in society right now. And it's no surprise that in pretty much all the straight pornography we do, they make it sound like women are exploited. No, the female character is almost always the pursuer. Always. It doesn't matter if it's the daddy stepdaughter thing or if it's the milfy mom with the young man. It's the paradigm is that the woman desires that man, and that's why it's a fantasy, and that's why men get off to it.
Yeah, that's sort of what I was getting at, although I think that there's also a component of not just sexual desire and being conflicted about their sexual desires, but also just having a place to talk about regular stuff and not be judged. Because I think a lot of guys find that just talking about vulnerabilities or concerns or just regular life concerns problematic with women in their lives, because they will go off the rocker about them and feel like he's not the strong, stoic person who's supposed to be his shoulder to cry on, supposed to be on her shoulder to cry on. But I wanted to speak directly to what you said about everybody wanting to be desired, and I wanted to add something to that. I think there's nothing better, at least from what I've seen. There's nothing better than, in terms of, my only sexual experience has really been with my husband, but it's nothing better when he looks like he feels desired. It's just so there's nothing better than a man who feels like who looks like he feels desired. There's a certain attitude or quality about him that's that's very it's sublime, perhaps. That's an intimate detail, so I'll let Rachel, who's been waiting patiently, take it away.
Okay, what I wanted to add to this is that, one of the things I'm seeing coming out of this discussion is that, well, there used to be, I think, a little more of an acknowledgement of human nature and human sexuality, even in times that we consider to be a lot more uptight. But I think they actually acknowledged that there was something else, that maybe sometimes people needed the opportunity to have, sex outside of their relationship, or some kind of service, and where there was an exchange that was outside of traditional relationships, and porn is at least acknowledging something that is very, very honest about human nature. The fact that sometimes we want to experience or have even a taste of something, of these sexual desires we're wanting to engage with. They want to be able to experience it on some level, and porn allows them to do that in a relatively safe and affordable way. But there seems to be this backlash against it, because people want to continue to deny this aspect of themselves, this aspect of humanity, because it's easier than acknowledging the truth. So I just wanted to add that.
I actually have a final question that I want to pose to Karen and Mercedes, because you probably have the most different views on these issues compared to me, in terms of what is possible between the genders, or what would even want to do. And this might actually be a very challenging question. What do you think we could do to actually increase men's sexual value? In silence.
Well, I'll go ahead and I'd like to, I actually think, ironically, that what's happening right now is it is reaching a stasis. And I say this because, I'll be out places, and I have 22-year-old men choosing to hit on me versus girls their own age, because they're petrified. They're petrified of girls their own age. They're petrified of being called rapists, and they're petrified of expressing their sexuality. And so the irony is that as things go further down the social justice route, and more women are doing this, are kind of demonizing young men for being young men, a lot of them are turning away from women in total. And this is where you're seeing MGTOW. This is where you're seeing a lot of it. We can't quell all biological basis, and this is where sex workers come in, and all these pornography and all these other things. But I think if these social justice types continue, the ironic end game will be women are already begging and pleading these men that they're dating and that won't marry them to marry them. They're already doing that. This is why they have these knee-jerk reactions to try to vilify sexuality and try to gatekeep it again, to try to get men to do what they want, but it's backfiring on them greatly. And I have heard multiple stories, even in the last week, of women wanting to get married, and the guy doesn't want to get married. Because why should he? There's no pragmatic reason to. Why buy the cow and the milk's free? Why commit to somebody who isn't there in total? All the relationships that are marriages that I see that are working, it's because they're truly partnerships. They truly love each other. They are truly best friends, and that's the only real reason to get married at this point. So men, just by virtue of rejecting these new false premise, will actually find themselves to be more quote unquote valuable again in the marketplace, and I think that that's a good thing.
I would have to agree that, because I don't think that it's ever going to completely equalize. Just from looking at the different sizes of gametes, the much smaller number, a few thousand ova over a lifetime, versus several billion sperm per ejaculation, that you're not going to ever get things to be completely equal in terms of, sort of the biological investment, gestation, breastfeeding, all of that stuff, right? But I do think that there is some value. I think MGTOW, like a lot of people accuse them of being like sort of the mirror image of feminism. And I think that the only way in which that's really 100% accurate is in the idea that it is kind of a sexual trade union, that it is a union of like-minded men who are essentially banding together loosely, just all on their own, without really any organization whatsoever, and saying, you know what, we're not going to pay that for your shit. We're not going to pay that much for your shit. And essentially, this is really what's going to do it. What's going to, like I often say, and it seems like really crass, right? When it comes to, what's a wedding ring? What's an engagement ring and a wedding ring? That's like $10,000, right? No wonder women flip the fuck out when they get raped. That's like grand larceny, right? Because the ring, that $10,000 ring, that's like, you have exclusive access to my vagina and nobody else has access to it. That's what that ring says, right? And so essentially, I don't know whether there's ever going to be a time when women are as willing to pay for sex with men as men are to pay for sex with women, where women are going to be as interested in the sort of visual, visceral aspects of porn, the very, very sexual aspects of porn. They're always, I think, going to want this sort of love story, romancy kind of thing behind. I wrote that shit, right, for women. And I know what they want. I know what they like. They don't just want the sex. They want the falling in love and the ending up together by the end of the story. So like they're always going to be a little bit different, and it's always going to be just in terms of male sexuality and female sexuality. There's always going to be an imbalance. But right now, it's just gone completely fucking out of whack. To the point where you have, and I'm going to say it, and I'm going to say it very unapologetically, you have like the most repulsive land whales standing at the slut walk in front of the microphone, bragging about their short skirts and talking about how men want to rape them, right? And I'm sorry, that's not reality, ladies.
Well, to riff off of that a little bit,
actually,
what I would see.
Yeah, no, I just want to make sure that Mercedes gets to say what she has to say, because she's sort of got a time limit. So go ahead, Mercedes.
I'm sorry. Yeah, thanks for that. No, well, one point I wanted to bring up just real fast. Karen brought up the prostitution for women, and I want to point out that actually, because I'm fairly familiar with a lot of people in these industries, this is becoming a real thing. This is becoming there's a real proliferation right now of male escorts for women, and traditionally male escorts were for men. And I have a couple of good male friends who are escorting for women, and it's becoming more common because it's exactly going back to, again, the irony, which is that this social justice feminist thing has pushed men so far away from women and really damaged relationships in such a way that a lot of women are paying. They are paying to have these experiences. They're paying to have, and all of the male escorts who are good at this are, they have to play the part of the boyfriend for the night, but there's definitely a time limit on it and a cost to it. So now that women are starting to experience what men have had to experience for a while, and seeing how that works, women, like Karen pointed out, women want more of the emotional bonding, and so the irony is that it's not working as well for women. A lot of men are perfectly happy to pay for a sexual experience and then be done with it because they are paying for her to go away. But the women who are paying for escorts, they are trying to create relationships with these male escorts, and
I don't know. I don't know if they're wanting to create relationships as so much as they want to create narratives and stories in their heads about it.
Right, exactly. Well, you're absolutely correct. And they're trying to frame their relationship with the male escort around that narrative and story. And these male escorts are having to really draw strong boundaries and really dump these clients that are overstepping. So it's a really interesting paradigm from a sociological perspective. I think we're going to start seeing more of it.
Well, I think part of it is I think these women may consider themselves that they still have this latent sexual power, and if they do give it up, even though they're paying for it, he still has a responsibility to give them a relationship on as well. I was thinking that's an incredible amount of entitlement. You're paying someone for sex, and you still think that you're the one with the sexual power in the relationship. I think it's time to let that one go.
Absolutely, and it's making a lot of these ladies really unhappy. And you know what? It's a good wake up call that you have to treat people, male and female. You have to treat them with some modicum of respect. You know, whether it's a client-based relationship or it's a friendship or it's an organic love relationship, you have to treat people with respect and love and decency if you want them to interact with you. And I think that, you know, again, a lot of feminists want to blame porn or sex workers for their own inability and inadequacies in terms of relating with the men in their lives, and that's simply not the case.
Yeah.
Well, that feeds really well into was going to be my answer to the question, which I feel like we need a going off the respect and the idea of a harem in a way, that we need to have women competing for male attention again, while we don't see that almost anywhere. And some of the movements are actually turning the tide, and that is beautiful to see. But I would like to see television, for instance, the boob tube, show not that one woman that two guys fight over in every single rom-com and every other movie, but I would like to see, you know, a man who is seen as respectable and valuable and treated as a king in a way, in order for women to actually think of him as respectable enough to outcompete other women for his attention in being nice and loving and respectful. I think if we institute the idea that it is okay for men to have multiple female partners, and that doesn't make them dogs and bad, and it just makes them do the same things that women do, shop around and look for their options, if we brought back that idea culturally and reduced shame and this evil rad femme idea of trying to squash down male sexuality and male value, I think that would be very useful.
Oof, I think we're losing Anna. She seems to be fading fast. All right, so thanks for coming on, Mercedes. Sorry we couldn't get you on for longer.
No, that's all right. Thank you so much for having me. Anna, those were excellent points, and you know, that's why they used to have The Bachelor. That's why you remember they had the show The Bachelor, and all the women fought for the Bachelor's attention, and somebody decided it was misogynistic, and now they have The Bachelorette, which is just stupid. So anyway, thank you all of you for listening. Thank you for having me on, Honey Badgers. Love you guys. I'm going to jump off now.
Okay, thanks for coming on, and certainly come back sometime.
I will.
And
Thanks.
soon.
Bye.
Bye. All right, Hannah, you've been chomping at the bit to ask this question, so why don't you go ahead?
All right, so
question from the chat.
Yeah, there's a couple of guys in the chat commenting on this. The question was, hey Badgers, can you comment on certain kinds of porn, specifically fetish porn and financial doms, especially clip sites and cam girl sites? I've seen plenty exploiting men. And this question has been sort of repeated over and over again in the chat while we were talking about
I would love to answer that.
And yes, well, I'm going to talk about it first because I'm in the queue and I've been waiting.
All yours.
So I just wanted to bring up a very simple point about this. From my understanding, the men that refer to this as exploitation consider it exploitation because sexual intimacy, sexual contact is a need, and of course these women are making money by meeting this need, and that seems to be the biggest bone of contention behind it. So I'm going to make a comparison again to another product. We have a history throughout civilization of sort of shrinking the way that we produce things to meet our needs. You look at farming, for example, as a really, really good example. There was a time when lots and lots and lots of people grew their own food. Most people grew at least some of their own food. In fact, there were times when all people grew at least some, if not most, of their own food that was produced by farming as opposed to gathering and hunting. And of course, people went out and hunted for their own food, gathered their own food. This was not a thing that it just spontaneously existed. We didn't spontaneously develop farms that produced for large portions of the population and grocery stores where you could buy your food instead of having to grow it yourself and go hunting yourself and gather yourself. And now, as far as these sites, these relationships, these financial relationships, I should say, being exploitation, if you consider those exploitation, then you also have to consider grocery stores a form of exploitation, and farming a form of exploitation. And as you get into the idea that because some of these areas of sexual interest are more specialized and maybe less socially approved, then you want to start considering the sale of alcohol a form of exploitation, or the sale of gourmet food a form of exploitation. And while I can see in the chat, the goalpost is now becoming, but these people lie, these people falsely advertise, these people are deceptive. That happens at the grocery store too. When you walk into the grocery store and you look at those shelves, you are looking at a very carefully designed presentation to entice you to buy things that you didn't go in there to buy, and to manipulate your choices. And it's your job to stay on top of it and read the ingredients on the boxes instead of looking at the flashy packaging. And it's the same thing in the sex industry. Obviously, nobody has ingredients written on their box, but the thing is, it is, as a consumer, it's your job to hold the people that you are buying from accountable for being honest with you. And when you see deception and stuff like that taking place in an industry that you patronize, you do the same thing that Gamergate did. You boycott. You discuss it with other people who are patrons of the same industry. You go shopping somewhere else. You don't treat those people the same as you would treat the upright grocer, the upright farmer, the person who's actually being honest with you. And that's really all I can say. I mean, I know that to some of you it's going to sound like victim blaming, but the reality is, consumers in every area of consumption have to live by, to an extent, by buyer beware. Now, going the other route with this, if we took a great deal of the shame out of the transaction, and it's not the women's end that shame exists on, but the men's end. If we took the shame out of the men's end of these transactions, it would make it far more easy to hold like fraud producers accountable. People who say, if you put this money in, I'm going to show you my boobs, and then they show you nothing, or something like that. It'd be a lot easier to hold accountable anybody that does anything like that if it wasn't embarrassing to complain. But the fact is, in order to do that, you sort of have to stand up to the shame too. So it kind of goes both ways. But the bottom line is, just existing does not make any of those industries exploitative any more than just existing makes grocers exploitatives, or farmers exploitatives, or liquor stores exploitative. That's all just commerce.
Well, yes, there's a risk inherent in every interaction, and the problem is a lot of times it is a lot easier to point and notice that you've been cheated when money is involved, but it's a lot more difficult to have a recourse or to even notice when you've been emotionally abused in the relationships where you don't pay for sex. But going back to, I want to touch upon both camming and financial domination, and those two, of course, we should not generalize from one bad apple to the rest of the group unless it's been confirmed that everyone's a bad apple, then you just don't go to that orchard. And some sites are like that. And a lot of times sites that are free for camming have the word free in them, or you get to see a lot of stuff in the public without paying, and they rely on tips. There is an element of a quote-unquote girlfriend experience that is fraudulent in the way that these girls, and I've met them personally, they have husbands, they have families, they have a situation that they do not reveal to their viewers. They lie about what state they live in, which it would be fine if it was for like protection of identity, but it is to create a false narrative, and then they fleece men for money in the sense of saying, yes, we're going to get together later because you're my online boyfriend and you're the only one, and they have 20 of those guys, and these guys send them gifts and lots of money to hopefully this girl will overcome her shyness, because if they meet, then her parents are going to ask how they met, and she can't tell them that they can, and all these lies that basically are used on gullible people or on trusting people. I hate the word gullible because trust is essential for everything. But we have people who exploit trust, and we have women who provide a girlfriend experience that is entirely none of the good of the relationship and all of the bad. So all of the money taking, all of the excuses, all of the not tonight, honey, I have a headache, for the purpose of fleecing them for money. So that is exploitive in my opinion, and I refuse to do anything like that and always have. But that is not end all and be all of camming. That is a very small subsection of very specific sites that I will not name drop, that they have that kind of thing going for them, and it's, I find, to be exploitive, but at the same time, that is sort of what you're engaging in, and so you should recognize there's risk involved with that, and if you feel like you've been taken advantage of, there's not much you can do, just like if a car insurance agent or a grocery store or something else tricks you or takes your money and doesn't pay you back, there's not much you can do other than sue them, and if that doesn't even work out, so there are certain losses you just have to take with life, and you cut your losses and do the best you can. Now, moving on to the other object or subject that was talked about, which was financial domination, I find that to be the least available or whatever the word is, form of exploitation, because it's just like BDSM for women. Those women who actively engage in being in porn or in personal lives, being tied up and beaten, and that's like their thing, they're kinky that way, they are not being exploited. It is something they want. And in my experience, I found men who do not care for financial domination will refuse to be financially dominated. It is a specific subset of people who feel desired, or they have a sexualization of giving their money and being used as an ATM. That is something they enjoy, that sort of objectification, and it's a very small subset of people, and those men who are not into it, you can't convince them to be into it. So I find a very strong parallel between women who do BDSM and men who enjoy also being submissive in BDSM, as well as financial domination, as something they choose to do because they derive a value from it and they're willing to pay somebody for it. Whatever that value may be, it may be because of a broken society, it could be something that's not all that healthy. I'm not in a position to judge that without speaking to them one-on-one directly and finding out their reasons for feeling this way, but ultimately they feel pleasure from doing that. So I find financial domination to be the least exploitive thing that was mentioned, unlike some of the camming practices. But ultimately, yes, it is something you're paying money for, getting an experience, and there are risks involved, but you also have to recognize that men are making a conscious decision, as constrained as they are by society, but then again, who isn't? So it's mixing a lot of things and ultimately ignoring the volition and autonomy of men who choose to do this.
Okay, I'd like to make a final point, because I think everybody's had their chance at the teat. So I'm going to make a final point of why I think that porn is better than social justice. And the point that I'm going to make is that the so-called exploitation of female sexuality in porn, or the use of female sexuality in porn, has never led to a situation where people have been subject to genocide. I guarantee it. And yet the use of female sexuality in propaganda throughout history has incited genocide. This idea of, for example, the Jewish, the creeping Jewish plague threatening the flower of Aryan womanhood, that's an exploitation of female sexuality to create and direct anger and hatred towards a group of people. Pornography doesn't do that. So, but social justice plus the use of female sexuality to spark that fear of sexual exploitation of women has been used in the past to cause incredible amounts of damage, destruction, torture, death, and brutality to justify it. So there you go. The use of female sexuality to create orgasms, far, far superior than the use of female sexuality to create death. All right, let's do the mailbag now, because I think we gotta move on. We have to move on. All right. Hi there. Name's Captain Gearbear. I think I said that wrong. Gearbear. Gear like Gerald, not like Gertrude. And I've been a follower for quite a while. Love what you guys do. This is mostly for Anna Cherry, and this is just a quick shout out to inform beg forgiveness for having respectfully named a very well-liked sex worker after her in my game. The player can overhear a conversation coming from a room in which they hear Anna pep-talking her John, telling him he's such a beautiful and valuable as a man, and how he should think of himself as such. I'm confident that she would take the gesture as a compliment, the way it was intended, but it felt polite to say something regardless. You all keep on badging. Badging. I guess that's sort of like badgering, except without the just like his name is like Gerald, but not Gertrude. Anyway, did you want to answer to that, Anna? Am I in my own little void at the moment?
Anna, where are you?
I'm sorry, I cut out for a moment.
Oh
So
my
could you
God!
repeat the question, please?
I just read an email specifically addressed to you. And I'm forgetting all my words now.
I'm so sorry. Could you repeat that, please? I am in a really terrible internet connection space.
Okay.
But I am here now.
Essentially, the gist of it is a person named Captain Gerbear has created a respectfully named a very well-liked sex worker after you, Anna Cherry, in his game. The player can overhear a conversation coming from a room in which they hear Anna pep-talking her John, telling him that he's a beautiful and valuable as a man and how he should think of himself as such. I'm confident that she would take the gesture as a compliment the way it was intended, but felt polite to say something regardless. So this is just a message to you.
That is beautiful, and I'm getting a little emotional about that. So absolutely, you encapsulated everything that I stand for, and thank you.
Oh, there you go. Thank you, Captain Gerbear. You realize that giving me an indication how to pronounce it is making it worse. All right, moving on. Adam says, if you look at Facebook's trending articles now, you'll see Ariel Winter, Modern Family actress, 17, gets breast reduction citing misogynistic attention, which conflates sexism with misogyny. Not sure if this is part of any agenda, but I wouldn't be surprised. I can send the screen grab by email if you're interested. All the best, Adam. So has anybody heard about this? She gets a breast reduction because of misogynistic attention, which is, I assume, people finding her attractive.
Wait, what?
I think that's pretty common.
I know 2 women that have had breast reduction surgeries, and neither of them did it because people were looking at them. They did it because their breasts were hurting their backs.
Yep, that's why I did it. Listen, I don't know, I think she just wants more attention. Yeah, why would you permanently alter your body just to prevent people from saying things to you? Wouldn't it be just...
You can't use that word, misogyny. You can't use it in that context because it means innate distrust or dislike of women. So it would be...
I got a correction there. The original definition for the word misogyny was just hatred of women. And it's been because of feminism that they've added all these other details. If you look up misandry and you actually find it in a dictionary, it just says hatred of men. It hasn't been changed. So misogyny isn't mistrust. It isn't dislike. It's hatred.
Hatred and contempt.
Rare.
Yeah. But
Even
I mean,
more can't use it.
I can understand that being a part of the decision to permanently alter your body, right? That there's a part because I knew a girl when I was in high school, and the difference between her breasts in size was about 3 cup sizes, right? And she felt like people were staring at her, and people probably were staring at her, and so she had an alteration. She had surgery to make them evenly sized, right? I can see if somebody has breasts that are like so enormous. The only person that I can think of right now off the top of my head would be the YouTuber Shieldwife, who's got just like the most gigantic breasts.
You could just dive right in, eh?
Yeah, they're obviously natural, right? There's no question that they're natural, and there's no hiding that. I mean, like, I wear a minimizer bra. I wear a bra that makes you look smaller than you are, right? Because I don't like having these kind of gigantic mounds just like jutting out of my chest. Like, it's not how I want to look, and I don't want people to notice that as sort of, to constantly be sort of glancing down at them. So I can understand how that would be part of the reason why a woman with freakishly large breasts, or even like seriously large breasts, might choose to have breast reduction surgery. Absolutely, like, women have surgery to increase their breasts because of the attention that they don't get. So why would it be so unusual or unbelievable for a woman to have her breasts reduced to decrease the attention that she
Because
gets?
it's unbelievably painful.
Yeah, but so is breast augmentation surgery, and women do it just so that they can look a certain way, just so that they can get more attention, so they can be more sexually attractive.
It's something I can't identify with, having surgery to change your look because of attention, but I guess I can understand that it does happen. Like, if people are going to go one direction, they could go the other direction. My thing on this is, it's not misogyny to stare at somebody's breasts.
No, it's
really not even sexism.
No.
It's just staring. It's not misogyny to stare at somebody's ass. It's not misogyny to stare at a car accident or anything else that draws your attention to it because it's unusual or interesting or different. It's not misogyny to stare at a beautiful painting or a lovely sunset or an ice cream cone or anything else that makes you happy to look at. It's not hatred, and it's not sexism. It's human.
Yeah,
I mean, staring is rude.
Okay, all right, guys.
But it's not. It doesn't deserve to be demonized like that.
There are women with absolutely gorgeous faces out there who probably have the exact same problem, except people are looking at their faces and they just can't look away.
Well, why don't they just tattoo realistic centipedes onto their faces so they don't?
The answer to that is to pick your nose. People will look away immediately.
Yes, exactly. Just pick your nose. In fact, that'll work with the boobs, too. You don't have to go through a painful surgery. Just learn to pick your nose.
In fact, there are people out there who have made entire careers about, like, careers in movies and TV based entirely on their striking looks. And they can be strikingly gorgeous, like Angelina Jolie, or they can be strikingly unattractive, like the woman from Throw Mama from the Train, who made an entire career off of being unattractive. They can be strikingly unique, like, I forget what the fuck his name was, but the dude from 28 Days Later, who played the Scarecrow in the Batman movies.
All right.
Somebody, yeah, but you essentially have people who have a specific way that they look that's either an ideal or the opposite of an ideal, or just something completely still sort of attractive but completely unearthly and unusual or unique, and people are going to look. They're just going to look.
There's some people who are looked at because they don't stop talking. All right.
Nobody's looking at me right now.
Robert Allen Anderson has made an inquiry. I'm a newly educated engineer in Norway, and judging by the other students, engineers look like any other group of people, and the good-looking athletic person is not uncommon. I'd even like to imagine that good looks are somewhat more prevalent in areas that require more from people, like an extended education. I guess this is in reference to that whole, this is what an engineer looks like, brouhaha,
Oh yeah, actually one of the interesting things is like unless they've come out with more recent research, they found that physical attractiveness and IQ are correlated. That essentially that the better looking you are, the more likely you are to be smart. That doesn't mean that you like inherently to have heritable IQ, right? A higher heritable IQ. That doesn't mean that for some people they will coast on their looks and not improve themselves and not bother learning anything and not develop their IQ any further than that. That is absolutely the case with some people. Um,
Well, I've
but
actually noticed with men, this is gonna be real quick, with men who are attractive from a young age, and have been bullied and not given attention because they're attractive, and as well as women who are late bloomers, they are forced to develop a
they
personality
are,
and and they end up
and a sense of
later
humor.
becoming attractive and some intelligence because they don't feel like they could go by their looks, and so they end up being in those fields later on, and you're like, damn, you're too hot to be in this, but no, that's
Well,
just how it is.
a sense of humor especially is something that you essentially it's something that you build because as and you even look at the funniest guys you knew in high school, right? The funniest guys who everybody like they were popular because they could make everybody laugh, right? They were short, right? Or they were unattractive or
Always short.
yeah, and it's because this is how they made themselves attractive to women, and this is how they made themselves popular among men, and popularity among men for a man translates into sexual attractiveness to women. It's all sort of tied in together. Like social status is everything, and if you can't earn social status by being tall and built, then you have to figure out some other way to do it, and that's either being very very smart or very very funny or just having a generally really pleasant gregarious personality. I've known guys that are not much to look at who get laid constantly because they just have a way of being able to flirt and charm everybody, not just women, but men too, and the old lady at the checkout at the grocery store, and everybody, right? So, I mean, they work on those other aspects of themselves to compensate for what they're lacking physically. Absolutely.
Alrighty then. Let's. It's time for the news. Rachel. Rachel has gone into the void. Apparently, she
Rachel,
either
God damn it, Rachel.
is like what? Rachel is swimming in the vat of spaghetti somewhere out there among the stars.
But
Are you saying she's avoiding us?
her avatar is just so cute.
Yeah, it's very cute. It's very cute, very quiet in the moment, which is not good. But
Wait, what's going on?
well, geez, okay. Well, glad you could join us. I know it's not really of any interest to you.
No.
But
I went to get a hair thingy for a second.
I can see how much dedication that you.
Oh my gosh!
So
I leave for 1 second.
Well, it happened to be the 1 second, the one least opportune second in the entire show for you to leave, and you managed to choose it.
You're on my list, Rachel. On my list.
All right.
Well,
You and the duck. You and that duck, both on my list.
At least wine and dine me before you fuck me. Just saying.
All
right. So what was the thing? What was the thing?
News.
Yes. News. Yes. It's. I'm doing the news
No.
thing.
Actually, we're just sort of just waiting in spaghetti.
You know what? Okay.
Get your news stuff out.
This is what makes the show.
I have it. It's already ready.
Rachel, it's okay. This is what makes the show charming.
Yeah, that's what you'd like to think.
I choose to think that way because that's how it is. End of
As
story.
the numbers of people tuning in go down, it's like you can see it spinning. It's spinning in a bitter, in a hateful way.
You know what? Now I have to go die now. But before I do, I'm just gonna sit here and read the things like I'm supposed to.
Okay, do it.
Okay, so woman kills social worker over custody dispute. In Barry, Vermont, a mother who lost custody of her 9-year-old daughter, murdered a social worker with a high-powered hunting rifle as she was exiting her office building. The victim, Laura Sobel, had been working the case in question and died on the scene. She leaves behind a husband and a daughter. Actually, it might be two daughters. The shooter, Jodi Herring, is currently being brought up on murder charges with her daughter in state custody. She fired 2 shots at close range and was reportedly calm and laughing after her arrest. 3 of the woman's relatives were also found dead in their home. It is believed that she killed them as well. So, we have a woman who has gone crazy and decided to go on what appears to be a killing spree.
Wow.
Yes.
I got to point some things out. First of all, obviously, the social worker did not deserve to die for being involved in a custody case. And so I'm not gonna. I want to make that disclaimer right now. I'm not saying that anybody deserves to die for this or that shooting people over this is right or anything like that. But there's a serious amount of complexity to this case, just like there is to any custody case. Then the significance is that that type of complexity gets ignored when a response like this comes from a man. Here we have a woman. People will listen to what's going on with social services. I think I posted in our topic chat about an actual written news story about it, because I know we had seen the video news story on it. But there were some things going on with that particular children's services agency that were not good. They had left children with parents or returned children to parents, and the children had suffered. They've either been killed or they'd been abused again, and they'd been considered to have taken children out of homes they shouldn't have taken children out of homes with. And this is a problem throughout child protective services, both in the United States and in Canada, and from what I understand also in European countries. And they're not just irresponsible in the way that they handle their jobs. They are also cruel and inhuman to not only the parents but the children. And they're treating the situation in a very mechanical way when they are dealing with human experiences and human emotions. And when you tear children away from their families, even when you are still dealing with a situation where the emotional fallout can cause or lead to, I should say, because I don't consider violent behavior to necessarily be caused. You still have a choice, but can lead to violent behavior, and precautions could have been taken in this case because there were signs prior to the violent act that violent behavior may be on the way, and they were ignored. So in addition to all of the issues with child protective services to begin with, all of the issues with whether or not this situation necessarily played out the way it should have played out, and so on, they also ignored threats, which they may not have done had the person making them been a man. So this is also complicated by society's tendency to treat violence as invisible or nonviolent or less threatening when the perpetrator or the person threatening it is female. And if they had actually taken those threats more seriously, the person that was killed may not have been killed.
I seem to recall a case of a man self-immolating on the steps of the courthouse that deprived him of his access to his child over a single slap. And I seem to recall the mainstream media describing him as a terrorist, right? Even though the only person he harmed was himself, and the only harm he did to the judges and the employees who he felt had wronged him was to make them late for lunch. You really do have to look at this in the sense of if this was a man, there would be no investigation, there would be no consideration in the mainstream of whether taking this child away from this woman was fair or was a just act, or whether there were things that they should have foreseen or could have done. It would have just been the entire Like, all of it would have just been piled on the man who did the shooting. And it's absolutely,
Is it
like,
absolutely?
why aren't they calling it a mass shooting? Why aren't they calling it a mass murder? It's a mass murder. It's every bit a mass murder, every bit as much as Sandy Hook and the Dark Knight shootings, and and every other mass murder that they claim is the result of that Anita Sarkeesian claims is the result of toxic masculinity and white privilege.
Okay, I have a thought. I have a thought. Maybe
Mhm.
what we should do is we should examine her online activities and find out if she is involved in anti-Gamergate or feminism. And then,
Oh,
and
excellent.
then,
Or even she just once said something like women deserve equal pay for equal work.
yeah,
And then,
or even that she commented in a site that was like a traditionalist anti-feminist site, but
yeah.
because feminism was a topic, she's obviously a feminist.
Hmm.
It's like, well, let's apply the same tortured logic.
Yeah, the same journalistic rigor. She's totally a feminist. I absolutely guarantee you she's a feminist, because that's just my hunch, and I'm
You
going to go with
have a
that.
feeling in your little toe.
I do. I do. I have a feeling in my little toe. Some say it's an ingrown toenail, but I say it's something different and more
It's
substantial.
perfect and complete evidence that this
Yes.
woman was a feminist.
Yes.
By the way, for those of you who are sarcasm impaired listening to this is sarcastic. We are actually, indeed, we're actually making fun of these kinds of logical
No
leaps.
way,
We're
Alice.
talking to you, Mary
Who
Sue.
knew
Hi,
that this was
Futrell.
sarcasm? I mean, it's just
She's obviously a feminist who infiltrated.
Oh, she probably was training from like the age
obviously.
of 2, under the tutelage of other feminists, right? In order to enact this thing, she's an infiltrate
Allison,
the, yeah.
She's a sleeper cell agent.
Yes.
Allison, your sarcasm melts steel beams.
Does it?
I'm just
It really doesn't, you 9/11 trooper.
And sleeper cells are rape.
okay, maybe not Allison's, but maybe yours, Karen.
Yeah.
Well, but yeah, okay. Well, the problem with that is that it is possibly
Problematic?
well, it's a problematic statement because you're basically insulting the person you're saying it to. Because it's a lie.
It was sarcastic.
It was sarcasm about sarcasm. It was
I
being
know.
sarcastic about the sarcasm.
And then you can also be sarcastic about your sarcasm towards the sarcasm.
In one big sarcasm loop, okay?
Yeah, maybe. It's possible. It could happen somewhere. Maybe here, possibly, in all of this frickin' spaghetti.
We should go to the next story.
Yeah, we should.
Let's go. Let's move on.
Yeah. Let's entertain our last two.
This one is not so funny. It's actually quite sad. Man dies from meningitis after staff diagnose it as man flu in quotation marks. I'm gonna butcher this name because it's Methuthu Mapongwana of Bristol, England, died 2 days after a paramedic told him and his wife that he just had man flu, which was their way of saying that they believed he was exaggerating in his description of symptoms, believing that men act in this manner when they are sick. Those 2 days prior, his wife had called an ambulance due to her husband's deteriorating health, but the paramedic had been dismissive of his symptoms like light sensitivity, neck stiffness, sore limbs, and an ongoing severe headache. Quote, I remember that the paramedic took my husband's blood pressure before telling me that my husband had man flu and didn't have to go to A&E, I think that's the emergency room. I was under the impression he thought my call had been a waste of time. The post-mortem examination revealed that the man had been suffering from acute bacterial meningitis.
Well,
holy shit, the symptoms of that should have presented far well enough for anybody with even a little medical training to even if they didn't know that he had meningitis specifically, they would know that something is wrong. The fever that would have presented with that should have shown that it was wrong.
yeah.
That it was there was something wrong. But
yeah,
this idiot should lose their
They're
license
no,
and
they're
go to
no,
jail.
that the idiot isn't working there anymore. He was dismissed before all of this came about. Before the complaint was lodged, if I recall.
Well, I want to
But
speak to this bullshit about man flu existing.
yeah,
Because I've worked in
And
healthcare. Somebody's echoing like
well,
really
no, but it
bad.
makes you
Who's
sound more
echoing?
epic. It makes you sound more epic, Kenna.
Yeah, but it makes me confused because I can hear myself and then
I know it's
ADD.
like this whole system is just triggering everyone's ADD,
I
and
had
everybody
honey
just
badger flu.
squirrels away, following their own weird
Diagnosed
train of
with
thought.
ADD. Well, okay. First of all, to explain, because somebody said meningitis doesn't look like flu. The term man flu is this insulting, ridiculously insulting, by the way, term that some women came up with to bitch about when men get like this is the same sex that says, oh, men never go to the doctor, men never seek treatment when they're sick. Turn around and like when men actually talk about their symptoms when they're sick, think, oh, it's man flu, he's pretending that he's sick when he's not. So men can't really win with regard to this situation, because no matter what they do, women demonize them for it. But the fact is, men are the ones who get up when they're practically on their deathbeds and go to work. Men are. I've watched this. I got my work ethic from watching my father do this. Actually, riding to school with him in the morning one morning, and he pulls the car over, vomits in on the side of the road, and then drives the rest of the way to school. And I'm asking him about it, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm recovering from a cold." And I need to go to school because the following things need to be done, and you can't trust a substitute to take care of those kind of things. They're too involved for the substitute to know what's going on. And this is the kind of thing that I watched all of the men in my life do, the reason men developed this behavior is because as breadwinners of their families, they can't just take time off of work to take care of themselves. They have to go earn money and pay the bills. And the reason that I had that work ethic was for the same reason. When the Child Support Enforcement Agency was taking practically my husband's whole paycheck, everything that taxes didn't take, I was the one that had to go to work every day to pay the bills. So when I felt like crap, I went to work anyway. These are things that throughout our industrialized history have been fairly common among men. And if this concept of man flu was a real gendered thing, we wouldn't have had a mostly male military. We wouldn't have had a mostly male industrial workforce. We wouldn't have had mostly male first responders throughout our history, because they wouldn't have been able to do those jobs. They wouldn't have been able to handle it. And there wouldn't be things like, syndromes with names like fibromyalgia would never have gotten noticed as mostly female syndromes, because when men had them, they would have talked about them, and instead of just getting up and going to work instead. It's not just insulting to men. It's terribly insulting to men, but it's not just insulting to men to have this term in existence and act like it's a thing. It's insulting to the intelligence. It's insulting to everybody within earshot when these women complain about man flu. It's basically saying it's illegitimate, and that when a man actually talks about his experiences, and he doesn't have the right to talk about them when they're not positive and happy.
Well, what drives me crazy is because and this tendency of men to play through the pain, to suck it up, and to just keep going, it's universal. It's not a cultural thing in the West. It's actually more common in places where life is harsher. Like my boyfriend worked with a man who is a Tamil raised in India. And his dad had a back injury such that he literally had to crawl to work on his hands and knees, crawl to work. And he crawled to work every day for 10 years after he injured his back, right? Because that's what he had to do to support his family. And this man that my boyfriend worked with, this man's son, almost died when he was 9 years old from a snake bite, and had to just suck it up, right? Like, you just have to deal with the permanent disability that you have from that and move on, because if you don't, there's nobody who's going to take care of you. You're the one who's responsible for taking care of others. And this is what drives me fucking crazy about this entire man flu narrative, is that if men were not sucking it up all through history, women would really have something to complain about. But it's like they're complaining about things that don't even exist. Don't even exist. And on top of that, men are actually more susceptible to viruses and other infections than women are. They just are, biologically.
Okay, I just wanted to point out something. I think that this whole man flu narrative is shaming men for showing any kind of weakness. It's just the same thing. It's what incites the stoicism, or it compels the stoicism, is using these mocking and shaming terms like man flu. But if there's nobody else going on, I think we need to...
Well, I want to make one point about it real quick. Feminists label that toxic masculinity, and that's their excuse for it, but that narrative is largely imposed by women. It's not, and it's an external thing. It's not toxic masculinity, it's toxic femininity.
Well, having any needs at all, like having the man-spreading thing. Oh, we can't accommodate the fact that you have more weight in your upper body, therefore you need to keep your legs open to balance.
I mean specifically. I mean specifically the stoicism, the tendency to be stoic. They will refer to that as toxic masculinity whenever it's exhibiting that tendency is detrimental to the guy. They would call that, they try to blame it on him when it is an external pressure that it is exerted on men by women.
Yeah, that's what I'm adding to that. I'm adding to that.
If it is a toxic thing, it is not toxic masculinity, it is toxic femininity. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but that's manspreading is forcing men to ignore what makes their comfort for the aesthetic preference for women. Man flu is forcing men to suck it up. At least they be labeled as being less strong than women, which causes them to that's an enforcing of that stoicism. And both of these attitudes are entirely perpetuated by women. And then, like you were saying, this is something that women expect of men. They have all kinds of words to shame men for showing vulnerability. Women do, and they enforce them.
Or prioritizing themselves.
Yeah.
But prioritize. I'm going to prioritize my own comfort. There's 14 empty seats on this train, right? And so I'm going to put my knees 11 inches apart because it's more comfortable. That's not okay.
No.
What I'm basically explaining is why the term toxic masculinity is an illegitimate term.
Yeah, I know. I'm saying that it's illegitimate for exactly the reason you're saying it is. Because women use terms like man-spreading and man flu to illegitimize any comfort, like men's desire for comfort or desire to just...
Well, the toxic masculinity is specifically used to blame men for the pressure exerted on them by women.
Yeah, I'm saying that. Yeah.
Well, I don't see any men complaining about manspreading. All I see is women complaining about
man flu.
And yeah, man flu, manspreading, man this, man that. And honestly, when you actually look at the way men interact, they will, if you're actually ever lucky enough to be a party to men just thinking that they're alone together, listening in on a phone conversation or something like that, they will offer each other comfort, but they will also sort of couch it in terms of, yeah, but you can't actually tell her that, man. You can't actually let her know that you're feeling this way. You can't actually let on that you're feeling, scared that you're going to lose your job. Or you're feeling insecure about this, right? Like, I understand what you're going through, man, and it's horrible, and they have an ability to connect and feel sympathy for each other, and to give each other encouragement and support. But at the same time, they enforce those masculine roles, but they're not enforcing them because they have those standards. They're enforcing them because it's I'm doing you a favor. I'm doing you a favor by telling you don't let on to her that you're feeling this way, right? Because it's not going to end well. You're
Because
just
those
going
are
to get
her
hurt.
standards.
Yeah, those are her standards. So you go ahead and pour your heart out to me, and I'm here for you, brother, but uh yeah, you're going to have to man up. And it's almost like this apologetic, it is what it is, what are you going to do kind of thing, because
You
there
know,
is nothing men can do about it.
this is going to be a really bitchy thing to say, but I wish women who do that, who have male partners who they cannot reveal any vulnerabilities to them, I wish they get cheated on. Well, of course,
Oh
a
yeah.
lot of men won't do it, but they deserve it. Ladies, if you're out there and you're in a relationship with a person who cannot actually talk to you about his fears or vulnerabilities, you're an asshole, and you deserve to be cheated on.
I actually have read discussions where men have cited that men who have cheated have cited that as one of the reasons, that they need somebody they can talk to without that pressure to be the strongest person.
Yeah.
They actually have to have somebody they can be vulnerable to.
All right, this is
The,
crazy.
the one I just want to say, the one person that I actually had sex with who was with someone else. I've never cheated on anybody, and there was only one instance where I had a fling with somebody who was married. He'd been sleeping on the futon in the basement for 2 years while she fucked every guy in town while he was working in camp. But and that's something that I witnessed myself. But half of that relationship that I had with him, half of that sexual relationship was almost like therapy. He would come and he would bare his soul. He would expose all of his insecurities, all of his vulnerabilities, all of his feelings of conflict, and just being in a position where there's no way to win. That he knows he can't stay with her because the marriage is nothing and it hasn't been anything for 2 years, but he just absolutely doesn't know. He can't leave her because then he's going to lose his sons and he'll have to admit to his loved ones that he failed, and all of these things. And he opened up so unbelievably with me, right? And I can't imagine that he had ever felt, even when he and his wife were courting, that he could open up that way to her.
Okay, this is very touching, but it's also time for the next news item. If Rachel hasn't disappeared.
Yes, I'm here. Jesus Christ, Allison.
Well, you have to admit, you've sensitized me to
You've let us
your tits. Calm them. Calm them. Calm thy memories. Okay, anyway, Natalie Dormer states the obvious. Natalie Dormer says men are objectified as much in Hollywood as the women, stating a British costume drama as an example. You can practically hear the angry screams from feminists. Quote, "My personal experience has been to work on phenomenal jobs in which the men are objectified as much as the women. Actors suffer from it too. Wasn't there a thing about Aidan Turner in Poldark?" That was the costume drama anyway. It's a visual medium, so to a certain extent you get judged on the way you look. We're not just talking about being slim here, we're talking about character actors with big eyes getting typecast in the friend role. It's not just about bettability, it's about your physicality more generally. I believe that perseverance will out, that if you are good and you work hard, everyone will notice.
Okay, I'll add to that. In the show that will not be named, the first season they had an 80s salesman who looked like he shaved everywhere, and was right out of the gym, and I was looking at this, and there was a scene where he was like half naked, and I'm like, I don't believe this scene. This doesn't have any ring of veracity about it. So yeah, not only are men objectified, they're also objectified to an absurd degree. And I was looking at this and I was thinking, wow, the standards for beauty for men in Hollywood are just ridiculous.
Well, one of the things that I find interesting is how many times when I'm watching, sort of a movie like The Avengers or Thor or whatever, right? And I'm watching it with my boyfriend, and he'll say, "Oh yeah, he took diuretics for that particular scene." You can tell.
How do you tell?
Right? Because the level of rippedness, the level of being able to see the sculpture of the muscles and the veins and all of that, when you take a diuretic, it essentially pulls all of the water from the outer layer of your skin. So it shrinks. It's like shrink wrap. It's like turning your skin into shrink wrap over your muscles and your veins and all of your body sculpture, right? So bodybuilders take diuretics right before they go on stage in a competition often, because it makes everything stand out. You can even see in some cases they're so ripped that you can see the actual lines of the muscle, because the layer of skin is so thin because all of the water's been pulled out of it.
Then obviously they can't maintain that, because if they did, they would kill themselves.
Yeah, you absolutely can't. But
what's attractive about that?
Well, because you can see every muscle.
But the thing is that you know that the person is suffering.
Well, but the thing is that it doesn't necessarily look like they're suffering. I mean, like I can see with some of these bodybuilders where you can see every single line of striation of their muscles in some cases, right? You can sort of tell that they're suffering, but when you actually look at that physique, most people don't understand what bodybuilders go through, that when they are ready for competition, that's when they are at their physical weakest.
No, I understand that.
That's when their muscles are the most physically weak.
And that's fine for bodybuilders, but we're talking about an ideal that people look at, like women look at, and they say that's hot, and that disturbs me, because we're looking at something, a guy who's actually suffering. And I'm not going to tell you the name of the show, because you already know what
the name of the show is.
The show is, okay. You know it. I'm not going to go there. But,
I want to say something real quick. It's not just in bodybuilding. This is something that happens in various industries. Have to maintain a standard of appearance, and male models. Anorexia is as rampant or worse among male fashion models in comparison to female fashion models. In fact, female fashion models in some cases have incentive to not develop anorexia or not behave in an anorexic fashion, because they lose their boobs. Whereas some of the male models, they have no incentive to maintain anything filled out, and they just become skinnier and skinnier. And you see the same thing in the music industry. Men in the music industry have taken physical risks, and also there have been men in the music industry who have been anorexic that have, we hear about it and talk about it, when due to physical standards and a need to maintain, the physical desirability, women in these industries develop dysfunctional behaviors like anorexia or other things, other forms of self-abuse. We don't hear about it so much when it's men. I actually have been in arguments on Reddit where I had to look up information and some old news stories about model deaths due to this, because I had feminists just deny, oh, men don't go through that, men don't experience that. Fuck yes they do. And it's damaging and painful and ignored. It's very largely ignored. My brother was not a lot, but a little into bodybuilding. He didn't do competition. He did it because he liked being big and strong. And just in the course of pursuing that physical perfection, he began to develop anorexic behaviors. And I got ridiculed for trying to combat that and talking about it by almost everyone except for my parents. This is, people don't care what a guy experiences in the pursuit of physical perfection. They only care what women experience in that pursuit. And so I think it's worse when men are objectified than when women are objectified in that way, because they're reduced, not only are they reduced to their physical appearance and how people feel about their physical appearance and everything, they're reduced to not even having their own experience of it considered.
Yeah.
Well, you know what, one thing that I want to bring up too in terms of acting and things like that, right? And modeling and all of that. If you actually look at male actors versus female actors and what they're required to go through and the extremes that they're required sometimes to go to. If you look at Sylvester Stallone in Copland versus Sylvester Stallone in even the latest Rocky movie, they're two very, very different physiques. He had to put on 50 pounds of flab to do Copland. If you look at Christian Bale in Batman versus Christian Bale in The Machinist, you know, in The Machinist, he was playing someone who was essentially bulimic. He was essentially an anorexic. He lost a ton of weight. He put himself through that kind, just for the role. Just for the role, he put himself through losing probably something like 50 pounds and becoming unhealthily underweight to do that role. And then, you know, a couple years later, he's playing Batman and he's all buff again. Men seem to be required at times to make these huge leaps between different body types. And women, you know, oh my goodness, Kate Blanchett, you know, if you mention that she's a little voluptuous, you know, everybody's fucking pissed off because she's actually a size 8 and that's not voluptuous. Well, you know, for a Hollywood actress it is, and she is curvy, and so is Scarlett Johansson, and so are a lot of Marilyn Monroe was very, very small size, but she was still curvy and voluptuous. And, you know, like honestly, there is there's less of a demand for that kind of, for an individual actor to go up and down and become, you know, between different body types for women than there is for men. It's just, when you look at some of the things that men put their bodies through just for the roles that they have to play.
And also just to look attractive. I mean, you're talking about diuretics and not even being healthy. I'm going to mute here because you're echoing. That's I don't see female actresses having to engage in something that they can't maintain in order to appear to be attractive.
Not only that, they're entitled to freak out over it if somebody asks them. I cannot remember her name off the top of my head. Oh, okay, somebody in chat said Megan Fox. Megan Fox, I think it was the one that they asked her to gain a few pounds. The director or the producer asked her to gain a few pounds for the Transformers sequel. And she just like freaked out, and there was a whole big feminist discussion over the news article about her freaking out on him for asking her to gain a few pounds for that sequel, defending her right to freak out over that. And it was simply that he thought she looked unhealthy. Not that he thought she was unattractive, but he thought she looked unhealthy, and he didn't want her to send a bad message to girls. Basically the same thing feminists say about asking women to be thin. They bitched about him asking her not to look unhealthily thin.
Yeah, oh jeez. Anyway, we probably should wrap it up. Like, we're past the hour.
I was only going to add like one last thing and then give it off to you. But one thing, if I recall, at least this is the way things used to be. The men you would put in action movies didn't necessarily. It used to be they didn't necessarily have to be particularly attractive. But as we've seen over the years, there is this pressure for them to be like increasingly buff, to be in the action role, and to be conventionally attractive. Have you noticed that?
If it keeps going, they're all going to look like they just stepped out of Dragon Ball Z.
and they're all going to look incredibly non-threatening. Like, I know it's going to sound weird how that someone can manage to be non-threatening while be like buff, but it's sort of like this certain amount of muscle to
Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ryan.
You've lost your speaking privileges, Karen, because you echo too
Oh,
much.
whatever, Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah, we heard it the first time. You need to keep repeating it,
Yeah.
right?
There you go. Right. Okay, so go on, Allison. Do the thing.
Yeah,
Do
let's
the chilling.
yeah, we're done.
Chill.
Unless you want to say Ryan Reynolds a few more times.
Ryan Reynolds, damn it.
Ryan Reynolds.
Ryan Reynolds is
Beetlejuice,
the epitome of the buff, non-threatening man. That's
Okay.
The buff, non-threatening man.
Okay. Are we done? Are we quite done?
Never.
Yeah.
Never done.
I used to think Shia LaBeouf, but now, oof.
Obviously, we're not done. Are we
Go
done
on.
now?
Yes.
Are we quite done? We're
Yes.
quite done. Yes?
I don't know. My speaking privileges have been revoked, so I can't let you know.
Yeah, but that doesn't stop you.
I'm so passive aggressive.
Yeah, you are.
Well, I'm done. I gotta go. I love all you guys, but I gotta
Move
go.
on to the show,
Yeah,
though,
okay,
Allison.
let me just end this show, and then we all can just go.
Flail, yes. Go on.
No, I seriously, I gotta go now. I'll see
Okay,
you.
well,
Bye.
yeah,
Bye, Hannah.
you and your damn Reynolds shit. Anyway, if you enjoy this show, and you want to see it continue, and you want to see it expand, because it would be cool to expand. I mean, you could make the spaghetti everywhere. The spaghetti could be like a floating surface of spaghetti throughout the entire Earth, everywhere. We could be like a moon of I believe Jupiter that's just all liquid, except it would be spaghetti. It would be the spaghetti ball in space, and this could happen. Anyway, if you like the show and you enjoy listening to us, please do consider becoming our patron at www.patreon.com/honeybadgerradio. May the spaghetti be with you. Always.